Welcome everyone to Beyond Sustainability, how to build regenerative eco startups. We are Solve Earth and some of our partners are listed along the bottom. They include Cosmos, which is a virtual studio you're in here, Tech Zero, Evolute 6 is a parent company in the positive impact community. So what is Solve Earth? Well, first of all, we are a community of aspiring eco-entrepreneurs. That's who we are. And to tell you a little bit about how the schedule is going to run tonight, we've got about an hour and a half. The presentation will run for about half an hour. And at the end of the presentation, we'll tell you a bit about how to join Solve Earth if you're that way inclined and if that is what you're looking for. Then we'll have a Q&A for about 10 minutes or so. And then we'll have a little after party where we can just hang out and chat and ask, we can answer further questions after the presentation's done. So most of it will be delivered within about half an hour, 40 minutes. And if you want to hang around for a bit longer, you can do. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You can mute yourself. You can go ahead and mute yourself now. In the bottom left corner of your screen, you'll see the mute button. And the chat function is in the bottom right of the screen. Feel free to put questions in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. All right, so why was Solve Earth created? There's three main drivers that we saw out there in the wider world that inspired us to create Solve Earth. The first one is that virtually all products and services are currently unsustainable. They're environmentally unsustainable. And it's very clear to us that there's a need, therefore, for nearly every product and service to be replaced with a sustainable one. The second big driver we saw is that the economy that we operate in today has a huge concentration of wealth and power. And what that means is that the vast majority of people are excluded from decision making, whether it's a company they're working for or in their wider communities. And what that means is that they don't have a voice in the major issues that affect them. So we see a real big need for a decentralized wealth and power distribution. And the third big driver is that technology is moving faster and faster. We've all heard a million analogies about how quickly mobile phones, the internet, started racing. Now we've got AI and biotechnology and cryptocurrencies, and everything is moving faster and faster and faster. The bad news is that in an unsustainable system, technology accelerates it. But of course, technology is neither good nor evil. So if we build a sustainable system, technology will accelerate that system. So this is the third big driver that we see and the third need that is out there in the world. How do we use technology to accelerate a sustainable system? So our mission at Solve Earth is simply to inspire and support an army of environmental entrepreneurs to build eco-startup companies. But the secret sauce is that we're founded on a new regenerative blueprint, and we're going to go into a bit more detail on that as we go through the presentation. And this enables us to secure a truly sustainable society that will thrive for millennia and not just for a few decades. So, a little bit more about us. My name's Gareth. I'm the founder of Solve Earth. My original career is as a healthcare expert. I'm actually a medical doctor. I went to business school because I wanted to be involved in bigger projects that have a positive impact on humanity. And I came out the other end and was involved in healthcare and health tech startups. But a few years ago in 2017, I was driving to work and I felt what can only be described as this like fireball in my chest, and I knew exactly what it meant. And it was a huge tension because I'd been thinking about sustainability as a potential career for a long time because I had a very strong interest in sustainability. I'd be obsessed with EVs and charging points and all this weird tech. And it got to a point where I just felt I had to do something and I really had to make a step into sustainability. So I did, and I founded Solve Earth back in 2018, just prior to XR, prior to Greta Thunberg kicking off. It seemed it was the right time, and I felt like I had to do it, and I did it, and I'm so glad I did. So I'm building a second career in sustainability. So I'm kind of, my archetype is as a sustainability second career pioneer. And I'll hand you over to Daniil to tell you a bit about himself.
Thank you. Hi guys, I'm Daniil, co-founder at Solve Earth, and I guess I'll just start from kind of the beginning and work up to where we are today. I come from an academic background of computer science and sustainable development. I started off doing computer science, but quickly realized I was a little bit more of a generalist. In that, I mean that I enjoyed a wide variety of subjects rather than concentrating into a certain specialization. And I discovered something called sustainable development, which I'd never heard of. But what it offered was a diverse set of modules to learn from, ranging from, economics to ecology. And I jumped in and quickly realized there was a lot more to it than just learning a lot about different things. It really kind of the main principles behind it was to look at the world and the problems from a zoomed out perspective, understand the connections and the networks and putting together a whole that works, out of multiple little segments. And I was particularly interested in kind of communities and agriculture at the time, and that was the first time I got exposure to the term regenerative, in terms of regenerative agriculture, where they were taking these barren lands and regenerating. And after university, I kind of knew I wanted to work independently. Started teaching, self-educating myself in other things: web design, web development, entrepreneurship. Startups start to excite me. I was kind of freelancing for a while, helping out small projects. I was really focusing on green projects. I knew I wanted to work in sustainability, to apply myself to projects that had a big impact. And I was obviously looking for jobs at the time because I wanted, again, to apply myself fully to something bigger, more impactful. But there was always something that didn't quite feel right. There was all these great companies, startups, environmental companies and startups, and they were saving energy, they were planting trees, they were capturing carbon. But there was always, in sustainability, there was always something a little bit more and a missing piece for me. And, that was how these organizations organize people. One of the biggest resources that we give in life is our work. How do you make an organization sustainable for people? The way we work together, the way we reward each other, how we contribute to the organizations, and how we make organizations kind of work for people just as much as we work for them. So that kind of set me on a path to kind of how do we embed this sustainability into organizations, and not just sustainable, like do no harm, but really regenerate it and improve everything it touches. So that's kind of what brought me here, was this concept of meaningful work and sustainability. This is what I saw in the world personally, that there was a huge lack of valuable sustainability jobs in the world today, and job opportunities. For me, a lot of it felt greenwashed. It was, not true sustainability at the heart. The mission, the meaning behind these organizations wasn't true sustainability. There was this bureaucracy, hierarchical structures that I personally couldn't really relate to, and money being prioritized over everything else, and sustainability almost like a separate if you can. And that's where I kind of saw the potential for startups as, a vehicle to really push change and really, create impact at a large scale. You can work on something that you love. There's energy, excitement, there's fear, obviously, and bad times, but that's just life. And most importantly, a space to really challenge the status quo. You have the autonomy to really create and build the world that you want to see and have it operating in a way that you want it to be operating. And for us, that means, aligning with money, environment, and community on as main priorities. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And I'm going to pass on to Gareth to tell you a little bit more about the wonderful world of startups.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniil. So here at Solve Earth, we actually believe quite strongly in the power of profit, despite what we said about money-driven companies having sustainability as an afterthought. We truly believe that profit is important, and the reason for that is that everyone can play their part in sustainability. and there are lots of different players, and everyone needs to contribute to make this happen. But we have seen how slow the government and the legal systems act. Don't need to tell you about the controversies over COP26 and whether or not countries are meeting climate change targets, all that stuff. Government response to COVID, incredibly slow. We know that consumer behaviour change can make a big difference, but really asking consumers to bear all the responsibility is, completely crazy, and it's not going to be enough. Non-profits do a lot of amazing work, but they tend to be limited in scale and impact. It's quite difficult for non-profits to get up to the impact level of Google, Facebook, Amazon, and all those huge tech companies that are running on a profit-driven model. And then charities also do a lot of amazing work, but they're not the primary drivers of the economy. So what we think is that for-profit startups enable speed, scale, and positive impact, and they can drive the economy. And people used to say, well, if you build an environmental startup and an environmental company, you can't actually make money. It's really difficult. Just to give one example, actually, I think we have two examples here. Allbirds, build as the world's most comfortable shoes, but also made of all natural sustainable materials. Founded in 2015 by an MBA from Kellogg, I think. And 3 years later was valued at unicorn status at 1.5 billion. And they just make shoes. Another great example of a company here in the UK is Oleo, who deal with food waste, and they just recently raised a $43 million Series B investment. So there's definitely money there, and it's growing fast. So that's almost a moot point now. So where are the opportunities in eco startups? Well, there are three major environmental problems, roughly speaking. The first one is damaging energy sources, mainly in the form of fossil fuels. And so there's a whole bunch of opportunities in creating a 100% renewable energy powered world. And that includes beyond the electric grid, it includes heating, lighting, transport, aviation eventually. All of these things need to be converted into renewable energy. And that's absolutely possible. There's some amazing work being done at Stanford University with roadmaps for 149 countries to go green, 100% green power before mid-century. The second big environmental problem is waste production and materials. At the moment, we have this linear economy where we take stuff, make it, sell it, and then throw it away. What we need to do is move to a 100% circular economy where materials are brought back into the economy, either back into nature to be biodegraded, or back into technical loops to be reused as much as possible. So there's a whole bunch of startup opportunities in that space as well. The third big one is damage to nature and loss of biodiversity as a result of the first two mainly and other factors. And so there's a huge opportunity in building eco startups that can protect and restore nature. And we're starting to see startups that do things like tree planting, for example, is the simplest version of that. But there must be a huge number of other similar kind of blue carbon startups, marine ecosystem restoration, that sort of stuff. So those are the three big broad buckets. If we go into a bit more detail and we look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a few years ago they did an analysis to look at the 60 biggest business opportunities that they saw. And you can see number one in food and agriculture is reducing food waste in the value chain. And you just saw the previous fundraise from Oleo that we mentioned there. And there's some surprising things in there like product reformulation, resource recovery. There's one called urban mining, which involves taking valuable metals from used electronics and extracting them, which they reckon will be a multi-billion-dollar business in just a couple of decades potentially. So there's huge opportunities right across the board here. Okay, so that's all good and well. We can build eco startups. People are doing it. How do we turbocharge that process? Well, there's a bit of an issue. The current system is a bit of an obstacle. And what I mean by that is that incentives are not well aligned between money, people, and nature. If you really boil it down, what we're doing is we're taking nature and we're destroying it for money. And then there's this other issue of people not being given a fair share in wealth and power and being alienated from decision-making mechanisms. The kind of solution for all this especially the misalignment between money and nature, is a massive change in laws in the legal system, like carbon taxation, the UN pushing international agreements for climate change. But as we've seen, it's not moving quickly enough. So we can build for-profit eco startups that can restore the environment. This we know. But we can also use those startups as a vehicle for the new economic system that we want to see. So instead of waiting for the law to change and governments to change, why not change the engines on the plane mid-flight and change the law inside the companies that we are going to build? And what that means is we can put a new economic blueprint inside eco startups. What does that blueprint involve? Well, it has three main elements. A new legal foundation that enables wealth and power sharing for all, very strong protection for nature, of course, individual development to make sure people are taken care of, and also advanced team governance methods, things like self-managing teams. There's some concepts around sociocracy and humanocracy, and basically these are ways of making sure that people come to work and can build stuff to the best of their potential without having corrupting influences and power dynamics that make it really hard to do your job properly in a safe space. And this protection of nature is particularly important. I think there's a few LBS people in the room tonight, potentially. And I'll sum that up by saying that shareholder primacy is dead. And why I'm prepared to make a very strong statement around that, because put simply, and please excuse my language, without protecting nature, there are no shareholders. We're all fucking dead, right? That's the truth of it. And that's why we need to move to a multi-stakeholder model with very strong protections for natural capital. So we'll talk a bit more about that, because this is a huge opportunity. And we've actually gone ahead and incorporated on that new blueprint. It's called the Fair Shares Commons. It enables power and wealth amongst all primary stakeholders, including customers, and very strong protections for nature. And what that enables is it enables us to move into this regenerative space that is beyond sustainability. And it does that because we're going to build regenerative companies. And you can see that in the middle oval in the diagram there. When you have a regenerative blueprint inside new companies that protect people, nature, and they make money and they make financial capital, you get this regenerative recipe forming. And once you have a critical mass of regenerative companies, you start to build a regenerative economy. And that's where multiple capitals are regenerated. So we're talking financial, we're talking nature, we're talking human and social capitals. And then eventually you get to an exponential uplift, and you have an exponential force to counter all these destructive mechanisms that we have in today's system. And we have a regenerative society inside of 50 years, which would just be an exponential change that is very difficult to imagine today, but I think it's entirely possible to do it. So this is really exciting stuff, and that's why we've decided to go all in on this. All sounds a bit complicated and far-fetched and very ambitious. I appreciate that. So where do we start today in Solve Earth? If you want to join Solve Earth, what does it mean? Well, if you're curious about starting an eco startup business, or you're simply curious about sustainability, entrepreneurship, and innovation, maybe you don't know where to start, maybe you're not even ready to be a founder, you just want to tip your toes in and see what this world's all about, well, you can join our community. And you can join as an explorer or a supporter, which means you can go and support an existing project, or you can just come in and explore opportunities to see where you best fit. Everyone is welcome. We're not just a tech outfit. We're not just building tech startups here. We aim to build eco startup businesses across the spectrum, from e-commerce, like Allbirds, maybe a sustainable t-shirt company, a sustainable coffee shop, all the way up to sort of fast fashion remedies and software and high-tech stuff as well, for anyone that's interested. So we cover the full range. We're an open house, and we start right at the beginning in the grassroots community for people that want to just get started and join a community. So we start small, but we have a very big vision for the future. Anything you want to jump in on there on, Daniil, before we jump in to how we're actually going to do this?
Nah, I think all good. I'm happy.
Awesome. So how will we build an army of eco-entrepreneurs? Well, we're really focused on that really early stage. So the first bit is education, focused on regenerative entrepreneurship. And that involves online learning and a once weekly workshop. We offer an 8-week onboarding course for people that join the community. And it's a once a week workshop. And then we have a 8-week build out course for people that have completed onboarding and they're ready to move to the next level. And that includes ongoing mentorship and support, the weekly workshops, as I mentioned. And it's a community, we have a community platform. We aim to share knowledge, share feedback. We have this virtual studio, which is a really fun space to work in. And it's really one of the major benefits is that you're going to work with like-minded peers and it's a safe space. And we're really strong believers in the fact that there are no gurus here. I'm not a guru. Daniil's not a guru. We've got the beginning of the seed and the foundations to help other people succeed. But really, this community is going to be co-designed and co-facilitated and self-managing the more that we grow. And then we have the secret sauce, which is the regenerative blueprint. New business and corporations, the Fair Shares Commons, multi-stakeholder wealth and power sharing, and all those other great elements for the more advanced stuff when you're ready to do that at a later stage. But really, we're focusing on the first two here in the education community sections. What does the journey look like for you as a customer if you join Solve Earth? Well, most of it is focused right now in step 1, which is your early idea creation. And then we move into startup validation. And then step 2 is actually starting your company. And step 3 is building your company inside an ecosystem. So all companies that start here in the community will be part of an ecosystem in the future. And in step 1, as we said before, you come in at the beginning and it's an exploration phase. It's an introduction to sustainability, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And then you move into experimentation if you find an idea that you want to test, and eventually into proof of concept to see if this is a thing that's actually going to work and be an eco startup. Then when you're ready, you've got some market validation. Eventually we'll get to the stage where you want to incorporate on that regenerative blueprint. You will incorporate as a Fair Shares Commons company to be part of the ecosystem. You don't have to, but in order to be part of the community ecosystem, that's the way you unlock those benefits. And we are also going to be looking at building decentralized autonomous organizations and using digital company tools to make that happen. What that means is DAOs are a new mechanism to share wealth and power using entirely online self-governance methods, which is really exciting and works really well with the Fair Shares Commons. The two come together and they're very complementary. So what that means in a nutshell is that you create a regenerative company using a regenerative legal incorporation, plus or minus. You have the option to also use this DAO or DAO structure. And then once you get going, you build your company, you start scaling inside a regenerative ecosystem. And this has huge benefits. What it means is that the companies are all grouped together. They're completely independent, but they share resources with each other. And that makes them anti-fragile and able to adapt to big shocks like economic shocks or smaller shocks, business shocks, through the ecosystem interlink. So this is really exciting stuff. And that's some of the more advanced elements that really bring in the regenerative concepts and help to protect those companies. So going back to recap on our mission, we've told you a bit more about the regenerative blueprint. So we're inspiring and supporting an army of eco-entrepreneurs to build eco-startups built on that new regenerative blueprint. And that is what enables us to secure a truly sustainable society and move beyond sustainability into regeneration. Previous, I think we've had 4 customer cohorts when we relaunched just after COVID in May last year. And these are just a selection of the examples of previous projects that we've had. It includes stuff like sustainable architecture, reducing waste in that arena, sustainable wine education, which was a new one I never even imagined. We have a video game that imagines future utopias instead of a future dystopia, as is often the case with our current kind of video game and movie culture. And one called Rewild and Replenish, which is an example of regenerative tourism, where customers can come on holiday and actually help to regenerate a natural habitat instead of being there as a sustainable tourist. You actually get to get involved, which is a really cool idea. These are some of the graphics for the previous projects, some pitch decks that were mocked up for those concepts. Rewild and Replenish is in the bottom right there. The sustainable architecture one, Better Blueprints, on the left. And the one at the top is one called Future Proofers, where we looked at decarbonising housing, getting renewable energy technologies into private houses. So some really cool eco startup concepts that have already been developed inside the community by us at Solve Earth, by myself and Daniil, and some of these ideas are coming from the community members themselves. We do have a community platform with a mobile app, which makes it much easier to communicate with each other. There's projects in there. There's educational resources around the regenerative blueprint. You can meet and chat with other members in here. And once you get a project going, you can create a project if you have a project team, and you can work with your project team inside the community. And that's a really great enabler, and there's loads of good resources in there. And that comes as part of joining the community. So, how do you actually join the community? Well, the next onboarding, which is the 8-week course that I mentioned, starts on the 17th of January, and that's the 1 night a week workshop. Commitment is 1.5 hours a week, which is really doable, and we do most of our work inside that workshop. So we do a presentation, and then you actually work on your project, and we have workbooks and resources, etc. in there. And that lasts for 8 weeks. Now, the cost of Solve Earth membership to join the community is £20 a month, which we think is a great bargain. If you think about Spotify and Netflix combined, it comes to around about that cost. And those are great platforms, some really good entertainment, but it's all passive consumption, right? If you join Solve Earth for the same price, this is active involvement in a community that could completely change the future of your career. So we think this is great value for money, and our previous members agree with that as well. You get the weekly social workshop in our virtual studio, you get mentorship and support, you get to create ideas and explore problems with passionate peers, which is where the real power comes into it. In the 8-week onboarding course, you come in and you learn by doing. We're really big on action. It's not just a place to come in and chat and discuss. We actually get stuff done in the workshops. It's a co-creation in a safe space, and you get to really get involved and develop your early eco startup business idea in the onboarding course. And you get to experience a little bit of a flavour of the future of collaborative work. We use online collaboration tools to enable that to happen, which is really exciting. And yeah, so that's how to join. Daniil, is there anything I've missed there that you want to jump in with?
Not at all.
Brilliant. I'll carry on then.
Yeah.
So just to give you a brief outline of what the 8-week onboarding course looks like. In week 1, we go into the regenerative entrepreneur's mindset, and we start to explore some of the psychological things that every founder goes through when you're entering on the entrepreneurial space, but with a regenerative flavor in there as well. Then we go on to early idea creation and lean startup methods. And then we bring in that Fair Shares Commons regenerative blueprint, which is modeled on the lean business canvas that some of you might be familiar with, but we've tweaked it and amped it up to bring in some of those regenerative elements. And then you go on to creating a very simple version of your pitch, and looking at the regenerative blueprint by the end of week 8. So by the end of the 8-week onboarding, you will have your own eco startup business concept idea formulated and ready to start acting on, or you can join someone else's idea. So that's the aim of the 8-week onboarding. That's what it looks like. So how do you join? Well, Daniil's going to put the link in the chat box, and what you need to do is you put in a £10 deposit, and if you do that now, it will save your spot for the start of the next workshop on the 17th of January. And this is entirely refundable, this deposit, if you complete the onboarding course and get all the way to the end of the 8 weeks. So if you pay a £10 deposit now, that'll save your spot for the next cohort. And spaces are limited to 10 people simply because we have limited bandwidth in the workshops on a Monday night, and we're keeping it nice and cozy and intimate for the time being to make sure that everyone gets the attention that they need in those workshops as we build up the community and scale it up. So yeah, that's us. If there's any questions, I will stop the recording now and we'll move into a little Q&A session.